The station hung in the cold darkness of space like a forgotten metal skeleton. Thousands of species walked through its long corridors every day. They came from distant worlds with different skins, different eyes, and different hearts. But one thing remained the same across all of them. They feared the Valkyrie commander. Sarah Chen stood near the observation deck and watched the stars burn in silence. She had been stationed on Orbital Hub 7 for 3 months now. That humans were new to the galactic community. They had only made contact with alien life 5 years ago. Since then, they had learned much about the universe. Some of it was beautiful, some of it was ugly. The treatment of the Valkyrie fell into the ugly category. The Valkyrie were small creatures. They stood no taller than a human child. Their skin was soft and pale blue. Their eyes were large and round like moons. They had thin tails that curled behind them when they were scared. And they were always scared. The galaxy had decided long ago that the Valkyrie were dangerous. Not because they had weapons, not because they had armies, but because they could feel emotions. Not just their own emotions. They could feel the emotions of everyone around them. The other species called them parasites. They said the Valkyrie fed on feelings like vampires fed on blood. They said the Valkyrie could control minds and twist thoughts. None of this was true. Sarah had read the reports. The Valkyrie simply felt what others felt. They could not control anyone. They could not harm anyone. But fear does not need truth to survive. Fear only needs a story. And the galaxy had told itself a terrible story about the Valkyrie for 1,000 years. Sarah walked through the lower levels of the station. These were the forgotten places. The lights flickered here. The air smelled of rust and old metal. This was where the Valkyrie lived. They were not allowed in the upper levels. They were not allowed in restaurants or shops or medical bays. They survived on scraps and shadows. Sarah had seen one of them beaten yesterday. A tall Morvaki trader had kicked a young Valkyrie across the floor. The child had cried without making a sound. No one had helped. No one had even looked. That image stayed in Sarah's mind as she walked deeper into the lower levels. She was not supposed to be here. The station rules said humans should avoid contact with Valkyrie. The Galactic Council said Valkyrie were a risk to mental health. Sarah did not care about these rules. She had grown up on Earth in a small town where people helped each other. Her grandmother had taught her that kindness was not weakness. Kindness was courage. It took strength to be gentle in a harsh world. She heard a small sound ahead. It was soft and high like a broken whisper. Sarah stopped walking and listened carefully. The sound came again. It was coming from behind a pile of broken cargo containers. Sarah moved slowly toward the containers. She did not want to frighten whatever was hiding there. She had learned during her military training that sudden movements created panic, and panic created danger. When she looked behind the containers, her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. A young Valkyrie sat huddled in the corner. She was smaller than the others Sarah had seen. Her pale blue skin was covered in dirt and bruises. Her large eyes were wet with tears that would not fall. Her thin tail was wrapped tightly around her body like a shield. She was shaking so hard that Sarah could hear her bones rattling. The Valkyrie child saw Sarah and pressed herself harder against the wall. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. She raised her tiny hands to protect her face. She expected pain. She expected cruelty. She expected what everyone had always given her. Sarah felt something hot rise in her chest. It was anger, not at the child, at the galaxy, at the 1,000 years of lies and hatred, at every creature who had ever raised a hand against this innocent being. But Sarah did not let her anger control her. She understood something that most species did not. Anger could be a fuel, but it should never be a fire. A fire burned everything. A fuel could power something greater. She paused. The Valkyrie child trembled and waited for the blow that always came. But Sarah did not raise her hand. She did not step forward. She did not make any sudden moves. Instead, she slowly lowered herself to the ground. She sat down on the cold metal floor. She made herself small. She made herself harmless. And then she did something that no alien had ever done to a Valkyrie. She smiled softly and whispered, "Hello, little one. I am not going to hurt you. My name is Sarah. What is your name?" The Valkyrie child stared at her with eyes full of confusion. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever asked for her name. In the language of the galaxy, she was called nothing. She was called pest. She was called vermin. She was called monster, but never a name. Never something that belonged to her. Sarah waited patiently. She did not move. She did not push. She simply sat there with her gentle smile and her soft eyes. She knew that trust could not be demanded. Trust had to be earned. And earning trust required time. It required patience. It required showing someone again and again that you meant no harm. Minutes passed in silence. The station hummed around them with distant sounds of life. Somewhere above, aliens laughed and traded and lived their lives without knowing that a tiny revolution was beginning in the shadows below. A human woman sitting on a cold floor. A Valkyrie child trembling in a corner. And between them, a bridge being built, one gentle moment at a time. Finally, the child spoke. Her voice was so quiet that Sarah had to lean forward to hear it. "Mira," the child whispered. "My name is Myra." Sarah felt her heart grow warm. "Mira," she repeated softly. "That is a beautiful name. It is very nice to meet you, Myra." "Are you hungry? I brought some food. Would you like to share it with me?" She reached slowly into her pocket and pulled out a small package. Inside were nutrition bars from the human section of the station. They were not fancy, but they were food, and food meant survival. Sarah opened the package and placed a bar on the ground between them. She did not push it toward Mira. She did not force anything. She simply offered. Mira looked at the food. Then she looked at Sarah. Her large eyes searched the human's face for any sign of a trap. She searched for hidden cruelty. She searched for the lie that always came before the pain. But she found nothing. She found only kindness. And kindness was something she had never seen before. The universe was about to change. It would start with a single bite of food shared between a human and a child. It would grow from there into something the galaxy could not ignore. But for now, in this quiet moment, there was only Sarah and Mira, a woman who chose to whisper instead of shout, a child who was learning that not all hands were made for hitting, and a small spark of hope that refused to die. Mira had never tasted anything so wonderful in her entire life. The nutrition bar was simple and plain. Humans thought of it as emergency food, but for Mira, it was a feast. She chewed slowly, letting each bite melt on her tongue. She wanted to remember this moment forever. Not just because of the food, because of the feeling that came with it. Sarah watched her eat and felt a strange mix of joy and sadness. Joy because Mira was eating. Sadness because such a small act of sharing should not be so rare. Back on Earth, humans fed stray animals all the time. They built shelters for homeless people. They donated money to strangers they would never meet. Kindness was woven into human culture like threads in a tapestry. It was not perfect. Humans had their dark chapters too, but they had also learned that cruelty was expensive. It cost more to hurt than to help. The galaxy had not learned this lesson yet. Days passed after that first meeting. Sarah returned to the lower levels whenever she could. She brought food and water and small blankets. She did not tell anyone about Mira. She knew the other officers would not understand. They would say she was breaking rules. They would say she was putting herself at risk. They would use words like protocol and regulation and safety. But Sarah had looked into Mira's eyes. She had seen the loneliness there, and she could not walk away from that. Mira began to trust Sarah slowly. At first, she would not let Sarah come within 3 meters of her, then 2 meters, then 1. After a week, Mira allowed Sarah to sit beside her. After 2 weeks, Mira placed her small hand on Sarah's arm for the first time. The touch lasted only a second, but it meant everything. Sarah learned many things about Mira during their time together. She learned that Mira was 8 years old in human terms. She learned that Mira had been born on this station. Her parents had died when she was very young. A sickness had swept through the lower levels. The station authorities had done nothing to help. Medicine was expensive. Valkyrie were cheap. So the sick had died and the survivors had continued to suffer. Mira had lived alone ever since. She scavenged for food in garbage piles. She hid from the crews that sometimes came to clean the lower levels. Those crews did not just clean garbage. They cleaned Valkyrie too. They would round them up and throw them into ships. No one knew where those ships went. No one came back to tell. Sarah felt rage building inside her with each new story. But she kept her face calm and her voice soft. She understood that Mira could feel her emotions. If Sarah let her anger show too strongly, Mira would become frightened. She would think the anger was directed at her. So Sarah learned to control herself in ways she never had before. She learned to feel her emotions without letting them control her actions. It was like holding fire in her hands without getting burned. One evening, something unexpected happened. Sarah was sitting with Mira in their usual spot when footsteps echoed through the corridor. Heavy footsteps. Many of them. Sarah's military instincts activated immediately. She moved in front of Mira and faced the direction of the sound. 3 figures appeared from the shadows. They were Calthorian enforcers. The Calthorians were tall and muscular with gray skin and 4 arms. They served as security forces throughout the station. They were known for their strengths and their cruelty, and right now they were looking at Sarah with cold yellow eyes. The lead enforcer stepped forward. His name badge said Vorak. His voice was deep and harsh, like stones grinding together. "Human, you are not permitted in this section. You are violating station regulations. Come with us." Sarah stood her ground. Behind her, she could feel Mira trembling. The child's fear washed over Sarah like cold water. But Sarah did not move. She had faced worse things than enforcers. She had survived battles and disasters in the endless void of space. 3 bullies with badges did not scare her. "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Alliance," she said calmly. "I am here on diplomatic mission. I have the right to go anywhere I choose on this station." Vorak laughed. It was an ugly sound without any joy in it. "Diplomat, you are sitting in garbage with vermin. This does not look like diplomacy. This looks like contamination. Perhaps you are sick. Perhaps you need treatment." Sarah understood the threat hidden in those words. Treatment meant detention. Detention meant disappearance. The galaxy had many ways to make inconvenient people vanish. She had read the reports about humans who asked too many questions. They were sent away for treatment and never heard from again, but something happened then that changed everything. Mira stepped out from behind Sarah. Her tiny body was shaking badly. Her eyes were wet with fear, but she stood between Sarah and the enforcers anyway. She raised her small hands toward Vorak, and spoke in a voice barely louder than wind. Please do not hurt her. She is kind. She gives me food. She talks to me. No one has ever talked to me before. Please let her go. Take me instead. Do whatever you want to me, but let her go. The corridor fell silent. Vorak stared at the tiny Valkyrie child standing between him and his target. His yellow eyes showed confusion. He had seen many things in his years of service. He had seen Valkyrie beg for their own lives. He had seen them run and hide and scream. But he had never seen one sacrifice herself for another being, especially not for an alien, especially not for someone she had known for only a few weeks. Sarah felt her eyes grow wet. She bent down and gently pulled Myra back behind her. No, little one, no one is taking you anywhere, and no one is taking me either. She looked at Vorak with steel in her gaze. You heard her. She was willing to die for me. A creature you call vermin just showed more courage and love than I have seen from any official on this station. Think about that, Enforcer. Think about what it says about your society when a child shows more honor than soldiers. Vorak's face twisted with something that might have been shame. His fellow enforcers shifted uncomfortably behind him. They had come here expecting an easy arrest. They had not expected a lesson in morality from a human and a Valkyrie child. For a long moment, no one moved. The tension hung in the air like smoke. Then Vorak turned away. He did not say anything. He simply walked back the way he had come. His fellow enforcers followed without a word. Their footsteps faded into the distance and then there was silence again. Sarah let out a breath. She did not know she had been holding. She turned to Myra and knelt down to meet her eyes. That was very brave, Myra, but very foolish. You should never offer yourself in exchange for someone else. Your life matters just as much as mine. Myra looked at her with those huge eyes. No one has ever told me that before. No one has ever said my life matters. Sarah pulled the child into a gentle hug. It was the first time she had touched Myra like this. She felt the small body stiffen in surprise. Then slowly, carefully, Myra relaxed into the embrace, her thin arms wrapped around Sarah's neck. Her tail uncurled for the first time. In that moment, something ancient and powerful awakened. It was not magic. It was not technology. It was simply love, the most dangerous force in any universe, and it was about to change everything. News traveled fast on Orbital Hub 7. Within 2 days, everyone had heard the story. A human commander had faced down Kalthorian enforcers. She had done it to protect a Valkyrie child, and the child had been willing to sacrifice herself for the human. The story spread from tongue to tongue like fire spreading through dry grass. Different species reacted in different ways. The Morvaki traders laughed and called it human stupidity. They said Sarah had lost her mind. They said the Valkyrie had poisoned her thoughts with their emotional powers. The Fenari scientists found it interesting from a behavioral perspective. They wrote notes about human pack bonding and protective instincts. They treated Sarah like a lab experiment rather than a person. But some species reacted differently. The Solari, who were known for their gentle nature and their love of art, heard the story with great interest. Their ambassador sent a private message to Sarah requesting a meeting. Sarah accepted without hesitation. The Solari had been silent supporters of Valkyrie rights for centuries. They had never spoken publicly because they feared retaliation. Perhaps this incident would give them the courage to speak. The meeting took place in a private chamber far from curious ears. Ambassador Threll was a tall creature with silver skin and eyes that changed color with emotion. Currently, those eyes were deep purple. Sarah had learned that purple meant thoughtfulness among the Solari. Commander Chen Threll said in a musical voice, "Your actions have created ripples across this station. Some call you a fool. Others call you something far worse. But I call you something different. I call you hope." Sarah sat across from the ambassador with her hands folded calmly. "I did not do it for politics, Ambassador. I did it because it was right. That child deserves kindness. All children deserve kindness. The species they belong to should not matter." Threll's eyes shifted to warm gold. "That is exactly why it matters so much. You acted from your heart, not from strategy. The galaxy has forgotten how powerful such actions can be. We have built our society on calculations and advantages. We have forgotten that sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is simply be good." The ambassador leaned forward with intensity. "I want to tell you something that few know. The lies about the Valkyrie were created on purpose. 1200 years ago, the Valkyrie were not hated. They were honored. Their ability to sense emotions made them perfect diplomats, healers, and counselors. They helped species understand each other. They helped resolve conflicts before they became wars." Sarah felt cold realization creep through her body. Someone saw them as a threat. Yes, the Dominion Council saw them as a threat, not because the Valkyrie were dangerous, but because they made war harder to justify. When a Valkyrie stood in a room, lies became difficult. Hidden agendas became visible. The powerful could not manipulate the weak as easily. So the council made a decision. They would destroy the Valkyrie's reputation. They spread stories about mind control and emotional feeding. They turned friends into enemies. It took 300 years of propaganda, but eventually, the galaxy believed the lies. Sarah's hands tightened into fists. She understood now why the hatred seemed so deeply rooted. It was not natural fear. It was manufactured fear, created by those who benefited from conflict and distrust. How do we fight something that has been built for 1,000 years? Threll smiled sadly. That is the question I have asked myself my entire life. But your actions have shown me something. Perhaps we do not need to fight it at all. Perhaps we simply need to replace it. One act of kindness at a time. One truth at a time. You and that child shared a moment that was more powerful than any weapon, and the story of that moment is spreading even now. The ambassador stood and walked to the window. Outside, ships moved through space like glowing fish in a dark ocean. There is a gathering coming. The Galactic Assembly meets in 3 months on the central world of Karath Prime. Every species sends representatives. Decisions are made that affect billions of lives. This year, the Council will vote on whether to officially classify the Valkyrie as non-sentient beings. If that vote passes, they will lose whatever small protections they still have. They will become property, resources to be used and discarded. Sarah's blood ran cold. We cannot let that happen. No, we cannot. But the humans are new to galactic politics. Your voice carries little weight. The Earth Alliance has no votes on the Council. You are observers only. Threll turned back to face Sarah with eyes now burning orange. However, stories carry weight. Truth carries weight. If you could bring that child to Karath Prime, if you could stand before the Assembly and show them what the Valkyrie truly are, perhaps enough minds might change. Sarah thought about Myra, about her huge eyes and her trembling body and her willingness to die for someone who had simply shown her kindness. She thought about taking that child into a room full of creatures who had been taught to hate her. It was dangerous. It was possibly suicidal. It was exactly what needed to be done. I will speak to Myra, Sarah said firmly. The choice must be hers. I will not force her into anything. Threll nodded with deep respect. That attitude is exactly why you must be the one to do this, Commander. You understand that freedom includes the freedom to choose, even for those the galaxy considers worthless. Sarah returned to the lower levels that evening with a heavy heart and a racing mind. She found Mira in their usual place. The child had made improvements since they first met. Her hiding spot now had blankets and a small light that Sarah had brought. It was not much, but it was something. Myra sensed Sarah's emotions immediately. Her large eyes grew concerned. You are troubled. Something happened. Something big. Sarah sat down and took a deep breath. She had promised herself to always be honest with Myra. She would not start lying now. I learned some things today, Mira, about why people hate your kind. And I learned about something that is going to happen. A vote that could make life even harder for your people. She explained everything. The manufactured lies, the Council's plans, the assembly on Karath Prime, and the chance they had to change things. Myra listened without interrupting. Her face went through many emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and finally, something that looked almost like determination. You want me to go with you, Myra said when Sarah finished. It was not a question. You want me to show them that we are not monsters. Sarah reached out and took Myra's small hands in her own. I want to give you the choice. This is dangerous. I cannot promise we will succeed. I cannot promise we will even survive. But I believe that you have a voice that needs to be heard. I believe that you can show them what kindness looks like, what courage looks like, what love looks like. You showed me. Maybe you can show them too. Mira was silent for a long time, her tail wrapped and unwrapped around her body in nervous patterns. Finally, she looked up at Sarah with eyes full of fire. All my life I have hidden. All my life, I have been afraid. I am tired of hiding. I am tired of being afraid. If there is a chance to help my people, even a small chance, I want to take it. I will go with you, Sarah. I will speak. Sarah pulled the child close and held her tightly. Then we will face them together, little one. And whatever happens, at least they will know the truth. At least they will have seen real courage. Outside, the stars continued to burn in their ancient patterns, but something new was moving among them now. Something that had not existed for 1,000 years. A partnership between humans and Velk, a friendship built on whispers instead of shouts, and a journey that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The journey to Karath Prime took 17 days through winding corridors of hyperspace. Sarah had used every favor she had earned in her military career to secure passage on a diplomatic vessel. The Earth Alliance officially disapproved of her mission. Her commanders called it unauthorized and reckless, but they did not stop her. Humans had a tradition of protecting those who did the right thing for the wrong reasons. Or perhaps they simply wanted to see what would happen when human stubbornness met galactic politics. Mira spent most of the journey learning. Sarah taught her about the different species they would encounter. She explained their customs and their sensitivities. She showed her images of the assembly hall where billions of fates had been decided over thousands of years. Myra absorbed everything with hungry attention. Her mind was sharp and quick. The galaxy had called her kind, primitive, and animal-like. But Sarah saw genius hiding behind those gentle eyes. Centuries of oppression had suppressed Valkyrie potential. Imagine what they could have become if given the chance to flourish. Ambassador Threll traveled with them as a secret supporter. The Solari could not openly champion Valkyrie rights without facing severe consequences, but Threll found ways to help that did not draw attention. Private meetings were arranged with sympathetic delegates. Information was shared about which council members might be persuadable. Slowly, a network of quiet allies began to form. They arrived at Karath Prime on the morning of the assembly. The planet was beautiful in a severe way. Its surface was covered in silver cities that reflected light like mirrors. Millions of creatures moved through its streets in endless rivers of color and sound, and at the center of the capital city stood the assembly dome. It was the largest structure Myra had ever seen. Its white walls stretched toward the clouds like frozen waves reaching for heaven. Sarah held Mira's hand as they walked toward the entrance. Security was intense. Scanners examined every inch of their bodies. Guards watched them with suspicious eyes. When the guards saw Myra, their expressions turned to disgust. One of them spat on the ground near her feet. Another muttered something in a language Sarah did not recognize, but the tone made the meaning clear. Myra squeezed Sarah's hand tighter. Her body wanted to run. Her instincts screamed at her to hide, but she kept walking, step by step, breath by breath. She had made a promise. She would not break it. Not now. Not when they were so close. The interior of the assembly dome was even more impressive than the exterior. Thousands of seats rose in circular layers around a central platform. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled those seats. Their bodies were so different that they barely seemed to belong to the same universe. Some had wings. Some had multiple heads. Some existed as floating clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields, and all of them turned to look as Sarah and Mira entered the viewing gallery. The whispers began immediately. Conversations died and restarted with new intensity. Pointing fingers and tentacles and appendages gestured toward the human and the Valkyrie child. Security officers moved closer, ready to act if needed. The tension in the room became thick enough to taste. The vote on Valkyrie classification was scheduled for the afternoon session. Sarah had submitted a formal request to address the assembly before the vote. Such requests were rarely granted to observer species, but Threll had called in favors from sympathetic members. The request was approved by a narrow margin. They would have 10 minutes to speak, 10 minutes to undo 1,000 years of hatred. It seemed impossible, but impossible things happened every day. Sarah had learned that during her years among the stars, the morning sessions dragged on with endless debates about trade routes and mining rights. Mira watched everything with growing anxiety. She could feel the emotions of the assembly pressing against her mind. Thousands of creatures all feeling different things: boredom, irritation, hunger, greed, and underneath it all, a deep current of fear. They were afraid of her. This room full of powerful beings was afraid of one small child because of stories their grandparents had told them. Finally, the afternoon session began. The assembly moderator, a massive creature called a Thronix, announced the topic. The council will now consider Resolution 7, the formal classification of the species known as Valkyrie as non-sentient biological resources. Before the vote, we have a request for commentary from the Earth Alliance delegation. They have 10 minutes. Sarah stood up. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained calm. She had given speeches before. She had commanded soldiers in combat. She had negotiated with hostile aliens in tense standoffs. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. Everything depended on what happened in the next 10 minutes. She walked to the central platform with Mira at her side. The lights were bright and hot. The silence was heavy and waiting. Sarah looked out at the thousands of faces watching her. Some showed curiosity. Some showed hostility. Some showed nothing at all. Members of the Galactic Assembly, Sarah began. Her voice was clear and steady. I stand before you not as a diplomat or a politician. I am a soldier. I have spent my life protecting others, and I have learned something important in that time. The measure of a civilization is not found in its weapons or its wealth. It is found in how it treats those who cannot protect themselves. She gestured to Mira. This child is 8 years old. She has never harmed anyone. She has never controlled anyone. She has never done any of the things your stories claim her people do. What she has done is survive. Alone. Without help. Without hope. In the darkest corners of your space stations where you throw your garbage and your guilt, murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with interest. Sarah pressed on. I met Myra 3 months ago. I found her hiding in a pile of broken cargo containers. She was starving. She was covered in bruises. And when she saw me coming, she raised her hands to protect her face because she expected me to hurt her. That was her experience with the galaxy. Pain was all she knew. Sarah's voice grew stronger, but I did not hurt her. I sat down. I spoke softly. I offered her food. And do you know what happened? She became my friend. She trusted me. And when enforcers came to arrest me, she stepped between us and offered to sacrifice herself so I could go free. This child, who had been shown nothing but cruelty her entire life, was willing to die for someone who had simply been kind to her. The assembly was completely silent now. Every eye and sensor was fixed on Sarah and Mira. You call the Valkyrie monsters. You call them parasites and vermin. But I call them exactly what they are. Empaths, beings who feel what others feel. They are not dangerous. They are mirrors. They reflect the emotions around them. When you meet a Valkyrie with hatred in your heart, they will feel that hatred, and they will be afraid. But when you meet them with kindness, they will feel that too, and they will respond with love. Sarah looked directly at the Dominion Council members in their elevated seats. I know why the lies started. I know about the propaganda campaign 12 centuries ago. I know that the Valkyrie were destroyed because they made manipulation difficult, because they exposed hidden agendas, because they held up mirrors to those who prefer darkness. Chaos erupted in the assembly. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded Sarah's removal. Others called for silence so she could continue. The moderator struggled to restore order. Through it all, Myra stood quietly at Sarah's side, her hand still held in the human's firm grip, her eyes watching the storm with ancient patience. When the noise finally faded, Sarah spoke her final words. You can vote to strip the Valkyrie of their status as sentient beings. You can vote to make them property, but you cannot vote away the truth. And the truth is standing right here beside me. A child who deserves better than what you have given her. A person who has more courage in her small heart than this entire assembly combined. She turned to Myra and knelt down. Myra, would you like to say anything? Myra looked at the thousands of watching faces. Her body trembled slightly, but her voice did not shake when she spoke. I can feel all of you right now. Your confusion, your doubt, your fear. But underneath all of that, I can feel something else too. I can feel shame. Many of you know the stories are wrong. Many of you have always known. But you were afraid to speak. Afraid of what others would think. Afraid of being different. She took a deep breath. I forgive you, all of you. I forgive the ones who hurt me. I forgive the ones who looked away. I forgive the ones who told the lies and the ones who believed them. Because hatred is heavy, and I am tired of carrying it. I choose to put it down. Tears fell from her large eyes, but she smiled through them. Please, stop being afraid of us. We just want to live. We just want to belong somewhere. We just want someone to say our names and treat us like we matter. That is all anyone wants. Is that not true? The silence that followed was different from before. It was not hostile or cold. It was thoughtful. Something had shifted in the air. Something old was cracking and something new was beginning to grow. The vote would determine whether that growth would continue or be crushed, and the vote was about to begin. The voting system of the Galactic Assembly was designed to be dramatic. Giant holographic displays showed the count in real time. Each delegate pressed their decision into private terminals. The results flowed upward into a central column of light that slowly changed color based on the outcome. Blue meant the resolution would pass. Gold meant it would fail. The fate of an entire species hung in the balance of that shifting light. Sarah watched the column with held breath. Beside her, Myra stood with her eyes closed. She was feeling the emotions of the assembly as they voted. Each decision sent a small ripple through her senses. Some decisions felt cold and sharp. Those were votes against her people. Others felt warm and soft. Those were votes in favor of keeping Valkyrie protections. The column flickered between colors blue, gold, gold. The numbers on the display climbed steadily. Thousands of votes poured in from delegates representing billions of beings. Somewhere out there, families were going about their daily lives without knowing that their governments were deciding whether a species would remain people or become property. The Dominion Council members voted blue without hesitation. Their faces showed no doubt or shame. They had committed to the lie too deeply to turn back now. Admitting they were wrong would mean admitting their ancestors had committed genocide through propaganda. It was easier to stay blind than to see. But something unexpected began to happen. The gold votes started to climb faster. Species that had traditionally supported the council began voting against the resolution. The Fenari scientists who had treated Sarah like an experiment voted gold. Their lead delegate later explained that watching Myra's speech had activated something in their analytical minds. They had realized they were studying prejudice, not observing nature. The Solari voted gold openly for the first time in history. Ambassador Threll stood as the vote was cast and bowed towards Sarah and Mira. Other delegates watched in surprise. The Solari had never taken a public position on Valkyrie rights before. Their vote sent a message that echoed beyond the numbers. Change was coming. Small species that had always been afraid to oppose the powerful began finding their courage. The Tikari, who were tiny beings no larger than human hands, voted gold unanimously. Their representatives squeaked in a voice amplified by technology. We know what it feels like to be considered small and insignificant. We will not help make others feel the same way. One by one, undecided delegates made their choices. The column of light continued to shift. Blue gained ground. Then gold pushed back. The assembly hall buzzed with tension. Delegates who had already voted watched the results with growing anxiety. This vote was closer than anyone had expected. What should have been an easy victory for the council was becoming a genuine contest. The final votes trickled in. The column steadied, and then the result flashed across every display in the room. Resolution 774 had failed. By a margin of only 3%. Not enough to be considered a mandate, but enough to matter. Myra opened her eyes. For a moment, She did not understand what had happened. Then she felt the wave of emotion from the assembly. Relief, joy, anger, confusion, but mostly relief. From places she could not see, from beings she would never meet. Other Valkyries scattered across the galaxy were feeling this moment too. They could sense that something had changed. They could feel that hope was returning to their people after 1,000 years of darkness. Sarah lifted Myra into her arms and held her close. Tears streamed down both their faces. They had done it. Against every art and every expectation, a human soldier and a Valkyrie child had walked into the heart of galactic power and changed history. But the story did not end there. The Dominion Council was furious. They had never lost a vote on species classification before. Their leader, a towering figure called High Counselor Vex, stood and demanded a recount. When the recount confirmed the results, he demanded an investigation into foreign interference. When no interference was found, he began making threats. The humans have manipulated this assembly, Vex declared in a booming voice. They have used their primitive emotional tactics to cloud judgment. This vote is illegitimate. The council does not recognize its results. Sarah stepped forward before anyone could stop her. With respect, High Counselor, your recognition is not required. The assembly has voted. The resolution has failed. Your personal feelings about humans do not change the mathematical reality of the outcome. Vex's eyes burned with barely controlled rage. You think this changes anything? That Valkyrie will never be accepted? Never. The galaxy knows what they are. One speech and one vote cannot undo centuries of truth. It was Mira who answered. She climbed down from Sarah's arms and walked toward the High Counselor with steady steps. Every eye in the assembly followed her. She stopped just a few meters from the towering figure and looked up at him without fear. You are very angry, she said softly, but underneath your anger I can feel something else. I can feel doubt. A small piece of you knows the stories are wrong. A small piece of you has always known. That piece has been hiding for a very long time because you were taught to ignore it. Vex's face twisted with emotion. You dare to read me. You dare to use your powers against a member of the council. I am not using powers. I am simply feeling what you feel. And right now, you feel lost. You have built your whole life on lies. And those lies are falling apart. That is very scary. I understand. Mira reached out her small hand toward him. I am not your enemy. I never was. None of my people were. We just wanted to help. We just wanted to use our gift to make the galaxy better. You could have let us. Instead, you chose fear. But it is not too late to choose differently. For a long moment, High Counselor Vex stood frozen. His entire body was rigid with conflict. The assembly held its breath. This was either going to end with a breakthrough or with violence. There was no middle ground. Then something remarkable happened. Vex's shoulders dropped. His fists unclenched. His face softened from granite to something almost vulnerable. He did not take Myra's hand, but he did not strike it away either. He simply stood there looking at the child who had just seen through every wall he had ever built around himself. I need to think, he said quietly. And then he turned and walked out of the assembly hall. His fellow council members watched him go with shock and confusion. Their leader had just retreated in front of the entire galaxy. Nothing would ever be quite the same. The aftermath of the vote unfolded over the following months. That Valkyrie were not suddenly welcomed everywhere with open arms. Prejudice does not die that quickly. But doors that had been locked for centuries began to open. Medical facilities agreed to treat Valkyrie patients. Educational institutions accepted Valkyrie students. Businesses hired Valkyrie workers. Each small change was a victory against the darkness. Sarah and Mira became symbols of something larger than themselves. Their stories spread across 100 worlds. Humans and Valkyrie began to form a special alliance. The two species discovered they had much in common. Both valued kindness. Both believed in protecting the vulnerable. Both understood that strength came in many forms. Earth formally requested that Valkyrie be given protected status within human territories. The request was granted unanimously. For the first time since the propaganda campaigns began, Valkyrie had a place where they were truly safe. A place where their abilities were celebrated rather than feared. A place where they could grow and learn and become everything they were meant to be. Myra eventually became an ambassador herself. She traveled between worlds teaching about her people and building bridges between species. Wherever she went, she carried the lessons Sarah had taught her. That kindness was courage. That gentleness was strength. That the smallest voice could change the largest crowd if it spoke with truth and love. And Sarah remained at her side through it all. Not as a protector anymore, but as a partner and a friend. They had started their journey as a soldier and a starving child. They had become something much greater. Living proof that the universe could be better than it was. That compassion could defeat cruelty. That hope could outlast despair. Years later, when Myra was asked to give a speech on the anniversary of the assembly vote, she said something that became famous across the galaxy. I was found trembling in darkness. I was certain I would be hurt again. But instead a human woman sat down beside me. She did not shout. She did not demand. She whispered. And that whisper changed everything. Never underestimate the power of gentleness, she continued. Never doubt that kindness matters. The galaxy teaches us to be hard, but the bravest thing you can do is stay soft. The bravest thing you can do is approach a frightened creature and pause, and then whisper instead. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Thousands of species that had once hated each other stood together in celebration of how far they had come. And at the center of it all, two figures stood hand in hand. A human and a soldier and an emperor. Proof that the greatest weapon in any universe was not a gun or a bomb or a fleet of warships. It was simply choosing to be kind when cruelty would have been easier. It was simply choosing to whisper when everyone else was shouting. And somewhere out there in the quiet corners of space stations and the forgotten places of 100 worlds,